fail to follow instructions, often the results are less than positive. For instance, ta-da! Bob, you fool, it's supposed to be 8 days a week. Everybody knows we're closed on Sunday. And then you have, well, sir, I'm sorry, I have no idea why your package arrived broken. Things just happen. Real men don't need instructions. Hey, who put this wall here? And this next one, you may have to look at it for just a moment or so. You know, now that I think about it, I think I can hold it a while. That could get ugly. Following instructions is important. When we fail to do so, bad things can and will happen, and when they do, we have only ourselves to blame. Too little dough for all I owe. How am I going to pay my bills this month? That is one of the major and leading causes of stress in America today. I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. How in the world am I ever going to dig myself out? Money, debt, for many of us, that is something that weighs extremely heavy on our minds. Debt in America today, it's epidemic. It's become a way of life for many people. We're over our heads in mortgage debt, college loans, car payments, medical bills, etc. Many of us are underwater with our finances. And then on top of all that, we have what we will call tonight plastic debt, credit cards, the easy and the painless path to falling into debt. They're always available, easily accessed, and ever ready. All we got to do is whip them out, swipe, or insert, and we have entered the pit of debt. Don't leave home without it, or you might miss an opportunity to dig your hole a little deeper. To give you an idea of how pervasive this credit card debt is in America today. Now this is a household, the average American household, everybody in the household combined that holds a credit card, and they carry a balance from one month to the next. The average balance is over $16,000 per household. 73% of Americans today are in debt when they die. And on average, they owe more than $62,000, and the majority of that is on credit card debt. Now, logic suggests that income levels should have an impact on credit card debt, right? You would think that the less money we make, the lower our income level, the more we would have to rely on credit cards in order to make ends meet. The lower the income, logic says, the higher the credit card debt. Not necessarily. I'm not going to go through every one of these. This is individual credit card debt now. For a person making less than $25,000 a year, their average credit card debt is $3,000. You go down to the bottom. Someone making $160,000 or more, their average debt on credit cards each month is $11,200. Logic is thrown out the window. The more we make in this country, the deeper into debt we go. And why is that? Why do we go into debt in the first place? Why is it so common? Why are so many people underwater? Well, there are a number of reasons. One of them is maintaining appearances, or commonly known as keeping up with the Joneses. The house, the cars, the exotic vacations, the club membership, and all the toys. They've got them, so we want them too. And what in the world would people think if we didn't have them? Well, we fail to understand or realize a lot of times the Joneses aren't in any better shape than we are. The Joneses might be on the brink of bankruptcy, and we're trying to compete with them, and in reality we might be following them right down the drain into bankruptcy if we keep playing the game. And then we have, as Americans, our unwillingness to sacrifice. And this actually covers a couple of different areas. We don't want to give up something that we already have. It's maintaining whatever our current lifestyle is. Now maybe my income dictates that I can't afford my current lifestyle. That's no problem. I'll just whip out the plastic and stay in the game. That shouldn't stop me. And then we're unwilling to sacrifice the things we don't have. There's things that I want. Maybe there's something that I really want, but I really can't afford it. Well, again, that's no problem. That's what that little laminated friend in my wallet is for. I'll go ahead and get it anyway. And we just keep digging the hole deeper. We're unwilling to sacrifice. And Americans have become addicted to stuff, addicted to buying. And after a while, buying and spending becomes habitual. It's like a drug. The longer you use it, the more you need it. You can't live without it. Our spending practices over time become addictive. And the thing about debt is it gets easier over time. The hardest part about debt normally is that initial step, taking that initial plunge into debt. That's hard. But once we've gone in once, well, the second time, that's a little easier. And each successive time gets easier and easier and easier. It reaches a point where you say, well, hey, I'm already in debt, so what's it going to hurt to add a little more? Credit card companies love that mentality. They're getting rich from our debt. Why do you think they're pushing the retail establishments push their cards at us so hard? Would you like to put that on your Kohl's card today, sir? You know, you can save 20% on today's purchase if you just sign up for a new Target card. They're getting rich from our debt. Advertising. Advertising is designed to addict us to spending and addict us to debt. Buy now, pay later. The definition of buy, to acquire ownership of something by the payment of money. When we pay later, we don't really buy anything. The only thing we acquire is going to be sleepless nights and headaches worrying about what it is that we bought once we can't pay the bill. Now, there's nothing wrong with a credit card. There's nothing wrong with using a credit card if we're careful with it. But if it's used incorrectly, it can lead us into this pit of debt. It can lead us into financial ruin. It can cause us to lay awake at night, tossing and turning. We can't sleep because we don't know how we're going to pay the bills. And then, of course, you've got the fairness issue. Fairness, this covers a lot of different areas in our life. It's not fair that I don't have what other people have. Why should I be the one to go without the stuff I want? Why can't I have what I want? I'm sure God would want me to have it too. After all, God is a kind, loving, and fair God. So why shouldn't I have whatever I want? Nowhere in the Bible does God ever tell us He's going to supply fairness. Not in that sense. As a matter of fact, the word fair in that sense doesn't even appear in Scripture. You can find fair like, well, physically attractive, that someone's fair in appearance. You can find it like a pleasant day, fair weather. But nowhere does God tell us that life is going to be fair. There have always been rich and poor. There will always be rich and poor this side of heaven. That's just a fact of life. There's going to be people that have more than other people have. If what we want is a classless society, a society where everybody's got the same wealth, everybody's got the same level of possessions, well, that's been tried. That type of society has been tried to be created. It's called Marxism, communism, and socialism. It's called Cuba. It doesn't work. There have always been economic classes in society, and there always will be. Now, none of these reasons that I've touched on so far, although they are contributing factors, none of them really identify the root cause of debt, why we go into debt, why we have financial stress and worries. And this is the tough part of this message tonight. This is tough to hear. It's tough to accept it. It's tough to look ourselves in the mirror and examine ourselves regarding this. But the real reason most of us have money and debt worries, there are exceptions, but for most of us, it's because we choose to. It's a choice that we make. It's the result of not following instructions. It is the result of not following God's instructions for how we are to handle our finances. To a large extent, financial worries are self-inflicted suffering. They are misery by choice. My appetite is bigger than my checkbook. Choice. Living above my means. Choice. Not content with what I have or what I can afford. Choice. Not willing to wait for what I want. Charge it. Choice. Trying to keep up with the neighbors. That's a choice. Borrowing more than I can reasonably pay back. Choice. Squandering money on bad habits. Choice. Failing to save. Choice. My way instead of God's way. That's choice. So many things, or so many of the things that we worry about in life, and there's a lot of them, illnesses, family issues, crime, aging, all the things that we have to worry about. The one area that we have the most control over is our finances. And it is also the one area where we most fail to exert control. We choose to worry over God. Well, how is it we are supposed to handle our finances? Well, God's very clear. He's very direct. He gives us 4 basic principles for how we are to handle our money and finances. And I think we have them up here. Financial instructions from God. Instruction number 1, acknowledging God as provider. This is 1 Corinthians 8:6. For us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things came and for whom we live. And there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came and through whom we live. And then Psalm 16:2. I said to the Lord, you are my master. Every good thing I have comes from you. Everything. Without exception, everything we have in this life, we have because God has provided it for us. We get a little carried away with ourselves every now and then and think that we're the one in charge. Anything we have, everything we have because God has blessed us with it. That's what this instruction is intended for, to help us keep that foremost in our minds, in front of our eyes all the time. We are completely dependent on God, and without God we have nothing. Instruction number 2, contentment. Hebrews 13:5. Keep your lives free from the love of money, and be content with what you have. Because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Love of money here, what it's actually referring to is coveting. Wanting more, desiring more, longing after more. It's not being content with what we do have, not being content with what God has given us. It is seeking happiness and security in material things instead of our relationship with God. And it knows no boundaries as far as economic classes go. It afflicts both the rich and the not so rich. Being wealthy doesn't cure us from it. Being poor doesn't make us immune to it. When we engage in it, the Bible is very clear, it is a blatant distrust of God. It is sinning against God when our faith, our happiness and security is based more on the stuff we've got, the stuff we can get, than it is the trust in God. Instruction number 3, avoid unnecessary debt. Proverbs 22:7. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Now, borrowing for a house or a car, debt such as that, a great deal of the time, that would fall into the necessary category. But we need to do it within reason. We need to do it within the means of our ability to pay it back without crippling ourselves and our families financially. where the patient part plays a huge role. I want a big house. I want a fancier car. Well, we all do. But maybe right now my finances tell me I can't afford that. We have to be willing to trust in God, purchase what we can afford, and wait to move up the ladder. The problem is today too many of us aren't willing to wait. We want what we want it now. Well, and culture and society tells us that we don't have to wait. Get all you can with as little up front as you can. That's become the American way. Max out your credit and get everything you can, and that term again, worry about paying for it later. We seek gratification and stuff, and we find that gratification turns out to just be a mirage. When the due date comes on paying the bills, we find out we can't make ends meet this month. It says here, the borrower becomes slave to the lender. When this was written back in biblical times, that was literal. If you borrow money and you could not make the payments on time, you became the slave of another person. You could enter into slavehood under them for up to 6 years to work off that debt. Back in those days, that debt often was a matter of survival. People would actually sell themselves into slavery to somebody for a sum of money in order for their families to survive. They'd enter into slavery to work it off. It was, if I don't do this, my family doesn't make it. That's not the case for us. Most of the time, the debt we go into is a matter of choice. It is choosing to ignore God's instructions. And today, a lot of us are in slavery. We just don't realize it. We're slaves to whatever it is that we've obtained through the debt. I've got the big house. I've got the new car. I've got all the toys. And now I'm a slave to my house. I'm a servant to my toys. My stuff is now my master because it takes everything I can make to hang on to them. You become slave to the stuff we have. Instruction number 4, generosity in giving. Proverbs 11:24 through 25. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. On the face of it, this is one of the most nonsensical passages of Scripture that exists. It's also one of the most abused and distorted. The more you give away, the richer you become. Well, how in the world is that supposed to work? Prosperity preachers will tell you, well, it's God's reward for giving to the church. In particular, giving to their church. The more you give to their church, the wealthier you will become. The wealthier God will make you. But you got to give to their church. To that line of preaching and that teaching, I will simply say, pull the handle, engage the flush mechanism, because that's what that amounts to. Giving to God through the church is important. God commands us to do that. We are supposed to give to God through the church, but what this scripture is talking about is much broader than that. The phrase when it says give freely, what that translates to is scatter. It means like walking out in a field with a bag full of grain, just reaching in and just scattering it, throwing it out, going out in your lawn and handfuls of grass seed across the lawn, scattering it. It's not keeping track of where every little seed goes. It's not keeping track of who benefits from the giving that we do. It means to give lavishly, to give abundantly, go beyond the immediate need, and just bless people with giving. If someone is hungry and in need of a meal, it's the kind of giving, well, I just don't buy them a meal today. I take them to the store and I stock their pantry for a month to make sure the problem is eradicated. Withholds unduly. This is talking about times when someone's really in need and we have the means to do something about it without really impacting ourselves negatively, and we refuse to do it. And the Bible identifies that as sinful. If we have the ability to address the need and we walk away, it's immoral. It is a sin against God. The word prosper, this is where people get hung up. Prosper. It does not mean to get rich. The literal translation into the original Hebrew comes out to accept your burnt offering. Back in those days, to atone for your sin, you took an animal to the priest. The sin was symbolically transferred to the animal. The animal was slaughtered. It was cut up into pieces. It was burned. It was a burnt offering. And it states that the aroma from that smoke, or that smoke going up, is a sweet aroma to God. It doesn't mean we're going to get rich. It means that we're pleasing God. We're putting a smile on God's face when we give lavishly. Whoever refreshes will be refreshed. Again, that word refreshed, it translates to rain or showers. It means to be rained on with blessings. God blesses when we give lavishly and abundantly to those in need. It may not be financially, but He's going to bless us. He will bless our socks off. He's going to pour, the skies are going to open up, and He's going to pour down blessings. It may be blessings that we don't recognize until years later when we have a chance to look back, but God will bless. Giving. Giving is the most practical way to keep money in its proper place and perspective. This is the linchpin in guarding our hearts against that lack of contentment, against guarding our hearts against coveting. It helps us. When we give generously, it helps us to keep money in its proper place and perspective. It helps us to keep our focus on God and keep God first in our life. A person who gives generously is the least likely to lay awake at night worrying about money. They're also the least likely to fall into the trap of unnecessary debt because they live their lives. Their lifestyle is based on having money in its proper place. It keeps our priorities straight. It keeps our relationship with God strong. And that is the key to freeing ourselves from financial stress. We talked before in earlier messages, our number one desire, the thing we want more than anything else, whether we even realize it, is God. Everything, all the happiness we seek, all the contentment, we're wanting God. We did that one night. Just name off anything you want. If it's good, then what we're desiring from it is God. It's a relationship with God because He's the only one that can provide those things for us. When we stray from God's financial instructions, we're participating in a game called more. We're trying to find contentment and happiness somewhere else other than in our relationship with God, and that's impossible. We bury ourselves in debt, we worry, we stress out, we make ourselves miserable because more is unobtainable. Playing the game of more, it results in increasing desires and lessening satisfaction. It is a game of diminishing returns. More is a moving target. It's like a rat chasing a piece of cheese that you've got on a string and you're tugging along in front of them. More is always, it's just out of our reach. Whatever more is today, even if we're able to obtain it, by tomorrow we don't have it anymore because it's not enough tomorrow. Tomorrow we want more. If our goal is more, if our goal is having more, our having will never catch up with our wants because you can't win the more game. It goes directly against everything God instructs us. When we ignore God's financial instructions, it's saying to God, I'm not satisfied with you. I want more than you. It's saying to God that we don't trust you, that we don't trust God to provide the happiness and the blessings that He promises. It is saying directly to God, I don't believe you. I believe my way is better than your way. When we fail to follow His instructions, the results are less than favorable, and we have only ourselves to blame for the outcome. The tossing and turning at night, the stress, the anxiety, the fear of tomorrow with finances, it's all self-induced so many times. The choice is ours to make. We can do it my way, and we can live with all the stress and the worry, or we can do it God's way. Fulfillment, contentment, and peace, the weight gone, freedom from worry. My way or God's way. Amen.